Welcome to our deep dive into the untold stories of how the Eastern Church managed to illuminate the darkness of the so-called Dark Ages, right?
I'm thrilled to unravel this with you. It's fascinating how history paints such contrasting pictures of East and West.
Absolutely. So, the common narrative is that after Rome fell in 476, Christianity just sank into endless darkness. Yet, this perspective misses half the picture, especially when we look eastward.
Yep, because while the West crumbled under the weight of barbarian invasions and collapsing institutions, the East managed to preserve a remarkable continuity, right?
Exactly. In the West, we've got a series of catastrophic events. Think of the sackings by Alaric and the Visigoths in 410, followed by the Vandals in 455, culminating in the deposition of Romulus Augustulus. It was a perfect storm that tore apart the urban and imperial structures.
Right. And with those structures dismantled, bishops and clergy found themselves, left to fend for themselves in shrinking cities with deteriorating infrastructure.
Yeah. It's like the very backbone of Western society was eroded. Cities like Rome went from over 1 million residents to just tens of thousands, and monumental architecture turned into, quarries for stone.
But then the story flips when we look to Constantinople, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, indeed. Constantinople, founded by Constantine in 330, wasn't just any city. It was a fortress city with massive walls, a bustling trade network, and cutting-edge urban planning. It remained populous and culturally vibrant even when the West was, disintegrating.
So the stability of the Byzantine state really played a key role, right? The existence of a centralized authority preserved both political order and cultural continuity.
Exactly. The state was one of 3 major pillars that sustained the Eastern Church. First, the imperial state itself, with emperors like Justinian. This guy oversaw not only a powerful army and bureaucracy, but also spearheaded major projects like the construction of the Hagia Sophia in 537. That structure wasn't just a building. It symbolized the enduring spirit of the civilization.
Sure, but let me challenge that for a second. Some might argue that Justinian's empire also faced huge challenges, like the plagues and wars that drained resources. How do we reconcile that with his portrayal as a beacon of stability?
That's a fair point. Justinian's reign was certainly not without its crises, but even amid such turmoil, his state managed to maintain institutions and foster a learning environment that benefited both governance and the church. It's like, his policies provided a buffer against the collapse seen in the West.
So it wasn't as if the East was entirely immune to problems. It was more about how it reorganized and adapted, right?
Exactly. The Byzantine Empire, while challenged by wars with Persia and later Arab conquests, innovated systems like the themes, military districts that tied soldiers to the land. And instead of complete disintegration, they cultivated a sort of renaissance of classical learning and art later on, what some call the Macedonian Renaissance.
So while the West's literacy and cultural institutions buckled under the pressure, in the East they safeguarded texts, philosophies, and laws.
Right on. In the West, literacy fell to the point where even kings struggled to sign their names, whereas in Constantinople, scholars copied manuscripts of Aristotle, Plato, and preserved Roman law through the Justinian Code. That's a significant divergence in how knowledge was treated.
And it's not just about written text, huh? The architectural marvel of the Hagia Sophia represents that cultural and spiritual preservation too.
Indeed, it's like, stepping into a world where divinity and art converge. While the West worshipped in crumbling basilicas, the faithful in Constantinople found themselves beneath domes that seemed to float on light.
It's striking. This contrast always makes you wonder, why was the city factor so crucial? After all, a thriving metropolis supports a robust network of art, commerce, and education.
Exactly. The city was the second pillar. Unlike Rome, whose urban decay symbolized the loss of an era, Constantinople's continuous prosperity meant that cultural, religious, and intellectual activities had a stable home. Its libraries, schools, and palaces helped sustain that vibrant tradition.
And that stability coincided with an edge in learning. Scholars kept the intellectual flame burning, even through tough times.
Right. And the third pillar, the commitment to learning. In Constantinople, scribes and scholars not only preserved ancient texts, but also engaged in debates like Iconoclasm in the 8th and 9th centuries, reflecting a dynamic intellectual life. It was turbulent, yes, but that turbulence pushed them to reorganize and rethink their beliefs, rather than abandon them altogether.
I see that. So then, when Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, there was this, bittersweet legacy, wasn't there?
Absolutely. Even though the city fell, Byzantine scholars carried with them a treasure trove of Greek manuscripts into Italy, which ultimately ignited the Renaissance. That migration of knowledge essentially reconnected Europe with its classical roots.
Yeah, that's amazing. It really underscores that what we often call the Dark Ages wasn't an absolute blackout, but rather a very uneven distribution of light.
Exactly. It was a patchwork of disintegration and continuity. The West certainly suffered radical disintegration, as historian Peter Brown put it, but the East, through state power, urban resilience, and the preservation, and even revival of learning, managed to keep civilization's spark alive.
One could say that, the narrative of the Dark Ages is too simplistic. It's more like a story of two very different responses to collapse and change.
Yes. And that's what makes this topic so compelling. Imagine, it's like two different strategies for survival. One is a collapse into chaos, and the other is turning adaptation into an art form.
Yeah, it's almost poetic in its contrast.
Keeping the flame lit, even against tremendous odds.
I love that analogy. But still, some might argue that internal issues in the East also pose dangers. How do we weigh that vulnerability against their success?
That's a good point. The East definitely had its challenges: wars, sieges, even debates like Iconoclasm that threatened to split the church. But instead of letting these issues spiral into collapse, they restructured and adapted. Their system wasn't frozen in time, it evolved, and the state's continued backing provided a sort of safety net.
That makes sense. And it's interesting that while the West had to essentially rebuild itself from scratch after centuries of turmoil, the East was able to seamlessly integrate both its classical heritage and its religious traditions into a continuous narrative.
Exactly, and that's why when people say Christianity entered the Dark Ages, they really need to consider the full scope. The Eastern Church, with its preservation of learning and state apparatus, functioned as the real lifeline of civilization during that time.
It's like, if you look at the bigger picture, the East not only survived, but eventually provided the intellectual fuel for the West's reawakening during the Renaissance.
For sure. Without Byzantium's transfer of knowledge, the Renaissance might not have ignited at all. It's a crucial reminder of how interconnected our histories truly are.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems then that maybe the narrative we've been spoon-fed needs a serious rewrite. The Dark Ages aren't as dark everywhere, if you ask me.
Precisely. The notion of universal darkness oversimplifies complex regional histories. In the case of the Eastern Church, its connection to a surviving, powerful state, a vibrant city, and a determined commitment to learning allowed it to remain a beacon, a torchbearer that kept ancient wisdom alive.
And in doing so, it also set the stage for, restoring lost knowledge and revitalizing Europe centuries later.
Exactly. The history here teaches us that resilience, adaptation, and the preservation of culture, even under dire circumstances, can shape the course of civilization.
It's an inspiring lesson. Right. And that's what makes exploring these histories so endlessly fascinating. Cheers to the Eastern Church, the unsung guardian of our past.